The city had changed, or maybe she had. Amarachi stood by the window of their new apartment in Bogota, watching the trees sway. No voices, no whispers, no cracked mirrors. Just Obinna in the kitchen, humming, making jollof with too much pepper, like always. She smiled. It had been 8 months since Idris vanished from her life. Or was cast out. She wasn't sure which. All she knew was, since that night in the old art studio, she'd felt lighter. More present. More hers. Obinna had been patient. After everything, the fire, the fainting spells, the night he almost didn't wake up, he still stayed. They'd moved far from Yaba. Changed numbers. Switched jobs. Started over. And Amarachi was happy. Maybe not fully healed, but hopeful. She rested a hand on her belly. 5 weeks. They hadn't told anyone yet. Not even her mother. But this time felt different. Solid. Obinna came up behind her, arms circling her waist. "You're thinking too loud again," he murmured. She leaned into him. "How do you know?" "Because I know your heartbeat," he said. "And right now, it's not just yours." She laughed softly, tears pricking her eyes. She didn't say it, but she was scared. She wanted this to be real. She wanted peace. Later that night, she opened her journal. Wrote 2 words. "Thank you." But the next morning when she opened it again, the page was blank. Instead, scribbled faintly in the corner, barely visible. "You never said goodbye." Her heart skipped. She slammed the journal shut. And from the mirror across the room, just for a second, she saw him. Idris. Watching. Amarachi told herself it was nothing. The journal. The scribble. The face in the mirror. Grief plays tricks, she reasoned. Even when you've moved on, your mind still invents ghosts. That night, she curled into Obinna's chest, listening to his steady breathing until sleep pulled her under. And then, the dream came. She was barefoot in a corridor. Dark. Endless. The air smelled of smoke and salt. At the far end, a shadow stood. "Idris, why didn't you wait for me?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost tender. Her lips trembled. "Because you're gone. I chose life." He stepped closer. But the ground beneath her softened like water. Each time she tried to move, her legs sank deeper. "I gave you forever," he whispered. "And you gave me silence." When he touched her cheek, it wasn't dreamlike. It was real. Cold. His fingers pressed into her skin until she cried out. And she woke with a gasp. The room was silent. Binna still asleep. But her cheek burned. Red marks, as if someone had held her too tightly. The next day, Amarachi forced herself to act normal. She kissed Obinna goodbye, went to the studio, met clients. But in every reflection, car windows, shop mirrors, even her phone screen, Idris was there, just behind her. That night, as she washed dishes, Obinna slipped his arms around her. "You're too quiet," he said gently. "What's wrong?" She almost told him. Almost confessed. But before the words came, the kitchen light flickered. The plate in her hands cracked clean in 2. And from the shards of glass, dripping down her fingers, was blood. Not hers. Obinna grabbed her hands, panicked. But Amarachi couldn't stop staring at the sink. Because written in the blood was one word. "Mine." Obinna didn't question the broken plate. He swept the glass, kissed her forehead, and told her to rest. But Amarachi didn't sleep. She kept turning the word over in her head. Mine. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't a metaphor. It was a threat. The next day, Obinna returned home early. "Babe," he said, voice strained. "I got a warning at work. One of my designs was erased off the system." "All of it?" Amarachi froze. "How?" "They said the hard drive was wiped. But the only file missing was mine." She reached for him. "We'll figure it out." He nodded. But his hands were cold. Shaking. That night it happened. At 2:03 a.m., Amarachi woke with a start. She hadn't been dreaming. She was drenched in water. Soaked to her skin, though the bed was dry. Obinna was gasping beside her. hands clutching his chest, choking, as if someone was sitting on him. "Obinna!" she screamed. He shook him. Nothing. His eyes flew open. But they weren't looking at her. They were looking past her. Above. He turned. Idris stood on the ceiling, upside down, staring, his face calm. His hands clasped behind his back. "You were mine first," he whispered. Then he fell. Not toward her, but into Obinna. A gust of wind slammed the windows open. The lights exploded. Obinna screamed once. And everything went black. Amarachi woke on the floor. Her hands bloody. Obinna was unconscious, body cold. And on his chest, drawn in ash, were the same 3 letters. Oi. Her initials. Idris's. Obinna's. Bound together. They went to a hospital first. Obinna passed all tests. No signs of trauma. No heart problems. The doctor smiled gently like she was overreacting. But Amarachi knew what she saw. She knew what wasn't on any scan. So 2 days later, with fear sitting in her chest like stone, she dragged Obinna to a quiet compound in Mao. The herbalist didn't blink when Amarachi told her everything. The dreams, the water, the cold, the floating man. She listened, face unreadable, then asked Amarachi to remove her necklace. Beneath it, a tiny mark Amarachi had never seen before. A ring-like scar circled her collarbone. The woman touched it and sighed. "He married you. In the spirit. You're his wife, not in body but in blood memory. You belong to him in a place deeper than flesh." Amarachi's voice cracked. "I didn't agree to anything." "You did," the herbalist replied. "Just not in this life." Obinna clenched his fists. "Then how do we break it?" The woman looked at him with pity. "To end a spiritual marriage, one of 2 things must happen. You either return to the altar where the vow was made and divorce him by force, or someone must die to sever the tie." Amarachi's stomach turned. "What altar? I don't even remember." "The dreams," the woman said quietly. "The corridor, the water, the fire. That's not your mind. That's the altar." On the ride home, Amarachi wept silently. Obinna held her hand but said nothing. He knew what she knew now. This wasn't a ghost story. This was a covenant. And if they didn't break it soon, one of them would pay the price. Amarachi started waking up with smoke in her nose. Not real smoke. No fire. Just the smell, thick, heavy, like burnt cloth and old wood. Binna noticed it too. He would open the windows, light candles, pray silently. Neither of them said what they were thinking. But they were both waiting for something to happen. That night, Amarachi had the dream again. Corridor. The water beneath her feet. The walls bleeding black oil. This time she didn't run. She walked straight ahead toward the flickering light. And there, at the end, stood a stone altar. Candles circled it. A white veil rested on its center. A ring sat beside it, ancient, bronze, still warm from another life. And in the shadows behind it, Idris. He stepped forward, dressed in red. Not angry, not sad, just waiting. "You came back," he said softly. "I came to end it." He tilted his head. "You can't. I didn't bind myself to your body. I bound myself to your womb." He gasped. "What?" He stepped closer. "Every child you carries part of me. That was the vow. That's how I stay." Amarachi's hands flew to her stomach. She woke up screaming. Obinna rushed in. "What happened? What did you see?" She could barely speak. But he saw it before she did. The bedsheet below her was streaked with ash, perfectly shaped into a circle like an altar. And beside it, tiny bronze ring. She backed away, shaking. Obinna slowly knelt, looked up at her, eyes wide, then whispered, "Amara, are you pregnant?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The test was positive. 2 blue lines. Shaking hands. No celebration. Amarachi sat on the floor of the bathroom, knees drawn to her chest, as Obina stood outside the door in silence. She'd always dreamed of telling him differently. With laughter. With light. But all she could whisper now was, "It's happening again." That week things spiraled fast. Obina got suspended from work. A client's building collapsed, one he designed, though his plans had been perfectly filed. The company blamed him. They called it negligence. He came home, suit wrinkled, eyes bloodshot, hands trembling. "I don't know how much longer I can carry this," he said softly, voice cracking. She held him, as if she could squeeze out the curse between her fingers. At night she lit candles, prayed, anything to feel warmth in the air. But the room stayed cold. The mirrors kept fogging. And sometimes, just sometimes, the baby's name would whisper to her in her sleep. "My name is Ifeoluwa," a soft voice said one night. She woke up crying. The baby hadn't even formed yet. But the spirit had already given it a name. One evening Obina snapped. He came home drenched, shoes missing, shirt torn. He had fainted in traffic. His brakes had failed. Someone else had driven his car home. "I'm being erased," he whispered. Amarachi tried to speak, but he stopped her. "I love you. But this love is killing me. And if you won't end it, I will." Then he left, without another word. The next morning, she found her wedding band in the kitchen sink. It wasn't wet. It was burnt. She hadn't stepped into a church in years. Not since her father's burial. Not since the world taught her to rely on logic, on therapy, on strength. But strength had failed her. The baby was barely forming. Obina had disappeared. And Idris. He was everywhere now. In shadows. In her dreams. Sometimes, in her reflection. The church wasn't big. Just a white-walled building tucked behind a filling station in K2. Someone had once invited her here. She forgot who. But now her feet moved like they were being led. Inside the worship was loud. No drums. Just voices. Cracked voices that sounded like they came from people who had bled before they believed. She stood in the back, hands trembling. Shut. Until the pastor said, "There's a woman here. Spiritually married. He comes to you in dreams. You're pregnant and afraid." Amarachi gasped. He kept speaking. "You didn't agree to it. But your soul was taken. Today we return what does not belong to him." She collapsed. On the floor the vision came fast. Altar. The veil. The ring. Idris stood before her, arms open. "I loved you." Tears streamed down her face. "I loved you too. But you're gone. And I'm still alive. Let me go." He shook his head. "You're my home," she screamed. "Then burn it down." She woke to hands on her, praying. A circle of women crying beside her. The pastor speaking in tongues. And the weight lifting. Like smoke clearing after fire. Like chains dissolving in rain. Her body felt empty. But free. For the first time in months. She felt like herself. She walked home quietly. Obina was at the door, waiting. He didn't say a word. Just pulled her into his arms and held her like something sacred. They stood like that for a long time. Then she whispered, "I think we can breathe again." Had been 3 weeks. No dreams. No whispers. No blood on the floor or ash in the bed. The mirror stayed clean. The journal stayed empty. And Amarachi stayed whole. The baby grew, stronger than the first. She could feel the difference this time. Her body wasn't a battleground anymore. It was a garden. Obina came home early on a Sunday. He was smiling again, a real smile. The kind that starts in the soul and climbs to the face. He kissed her belly and whispered, "I ordered the crib." She laughed. "You didn't even ask what color I wanted." He held her face. "I don't care what color it is. I just want this baby to arrive in peace." They sat on the couch that evening, wrapped in one throw blanket, watching a cheesy Yoruba love film neither of them really liked. But they watched anyway. Because silence, for once, felt like rest, not warning. That night, Amarachi stood in front of the mirror again. Not afraid. Just reflective. She touched the scar near her collarbone. The mark was still there, faint, but permanent, a reminder of everything she survived. She whispered a quiet prayer. Not loud, not poetic, just honest. Thank you for loving me. But I've chosen to live. Behind her, Obinna stepped in. You okay? She nodded. I just needed to say goodbye. Properly this time. He smiled. Kissed her neck. Then let's start over. Properly this time. 9 months later, the baby cried for the first time. Binna wept. Amarachi laughed. They named her Ifeoluwa, the name that once came to her in a dream. The nurse handed her the child, wrapped in white. Tini. Beautiful. In that moment, Amarachi looked up. Just in case. Just once more. But the mirror didn't fog. No whispers. No shadow behind her. Only her. Only now.